What scary stories still haunt you? My husband hasn't spoken to me in months, so I decided to surprise him at dinner. "Hi, honey," I said, bustling over the stovetop. "How was your day?" He ignored me. He threw down his briefcase and got a beer from the fridge, the same as always. "Is dinner ready yet?" I pointed to the timer ticking on the kitchen counter. The meatloaf needed another 20 minutes. "I think the correct phrase is what's cooking good looking," I joked. "Look, I've had a long day," he sighed, draining his beer. "Just come get me when it's ready." "I will, honey," I said. "After dinner, I have a surprise for you." "Whatever." And with that, he retreated upstairs to play video games. Supper seemed to be all he cared about these days. So long as he was fed, he appeared to want nothing else to do with me. I tried to get him to talk to me. Something was clearly bothering him. He just wouldn't open up. But that was all right. Once dinner was ready, I hollered up the stairs that it was time to eat. The spread was immaculate. Roast cauliflower with lemongrass and shallot, jacket potatoes with garlic confit, and for the main course, a beautiful meatloaf, my own recipe, his favorite. I thought he might even notice. Instead, he simply began eating without even looking at his plate, his eyes glued to his phone. But that was all right. After 15 minutes of silence broken only by the sounds of chewing, I spoke up. "So, how's the meatloaf?" I asked. "Good," he grunted. "Curious about your surprise?" I asked, smiling. "Want a hint?" "What do you want from me, Rose?" he scoffed, plating another ketchupy slice. "I didn't forget your birthday, did I?" His words stung, but I tried not to let it show. I'd been silently rehearsing what I was about to say for hours. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you," I said, "about the baby." He stopped chewing for a moment, his jaw set. He always wanted to be a father, but 6 months ago, I'd miscarried at 20 weeks. The doctors told me we shouldn't try again. "I told you before that I didn't want to talk about it." "But I do," I said. "She was my baby, too." "If you can't give me a child," he said, popping the last of his meatloaf in his mouth, "then we have nothing more to talk about." Ow. He'd bitten down on something so hard he nearly cracked a tooth. As he gingerly pulled the thing from between his lips, he shuddered, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. "Is that?" he asked, softly. I nodded. "There's leftovers in the freezer if you're still hungry." A belly button ring, the kind his mistress wore. He clutched his mouth in horror, staring at me with more passion than he had in months. "Is this it, you crazy bitch?" he cried. "Is this the surprise?" "Of course not," I replied, pleased that I finally had his attention. "She was pregnant." Don't stay up till 12. My grandma used to tell me, if you ever hear whispering lullabies, whatever you do not open your eyes. The Midnight Man was the name people in my town called him, or it. I never believed them, but every night my mom would make sure I sleep before 11:30, and every night she'd tell me, do not come out of bed before daylight. I used to think it's all nonsense, a folk tale, but a few days ago I came back home. I had some work, so I stayed up late watching a movie while catching up on stuff. I looked at the clock and it was almost 1 a.m. when suddenly I heard a light whistling from outside my window, and then a whispered lullaby. Shadows creep and whispers call. Sleep shall keep you safe from all. Rest your head, don't make a sound. Footsteps echo all around. The window creaked. If you wake up, toss and turn. The sleepless one, it will return. I couldn't help but stare at the window. I couldn't look away. It's been 25 days now. My family put missing posters all over town. Yesterday, the police found my body in the river. I still remember its smile. Looked just like my great-uncle's, who he drowned in that same river. We put our faith in him. The man was beyond brilliant, a once-in-a-millennia genius. For 30 years, he rose up through the ranks in the field of astrophysics until he was globally considered to be the top of the field. During his ascent, he unlocked mysteries of the universe that had baffled scientists for years, and the mathematical formulas that he wrote became the basis for the code in nearly every computer system tracking the heavens. It took a while for computing power to catch up with his vision, but eventually, he was able to run simulations which, as he put it, could predict the future. Because he had an obsession. It wasn't the academic honors that drove him, nor the fame, the influence, or the fortune that he garnered along the way. No, he was consumed with a single, inescapable burden that had plagued him since his youth. As a child, he'd astounded his teachers. At the age of 11, he became the youngest person in history to earn a doctorate. And at some point during those studies, He claimed that he stumbled upon a constant, one that both fascinated and terrified him. No matter how many different ways he tried to calculate it, no matter what models he ran or variables he included in his equations, he said it never changed. The world was going to end before he reached his 42nd birthday. Of course, other scientists attempted to check his work. Concerted efforts were put into peer-reviewing his theories and the papers he published, but they were simply too complex for anyone else to confidently prove or disprove. The only thing they could say with some degree of certainty is that his math always seemed to work. It perfectly forecasted every action of every object hurtling through space. And so, an unease began to grow around the globe. Yet, even though he'd never been wrong before, he still hadn't convinced everyone that it was coming. Not until his latest simulation showed exactly when and how it would happen. An asteroid was en route. Events set in motion at the very birth of the universe that he'd uncovered as a mere child. Once he was able to point others to it, they verified that it was indeed on a course for Earth. Or at least to come very close to it. The man's models all showed it impacting. His math had it smashing directly into Brazil. However, some scientists spot-checked its trajectory using more traditional methods and touted that it would miss, that the man was wrong. They were quickly dismissed, and he was given full control over the project to save the planet. He directed the world's militaries and space organizations in an effort to knock it off course. They followed his exact instructions when launching the missiles. And it was far too late when they realized that the man had lied, that the asteroid would have missed, and that he'd always known that. But he didn't want it to.